Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks very much for joining us for this session. There's sessions obviously running throughout the day here. This one's super interesting, looking at cities, looking at opportunities, looking at the trends around those. We're going to have, from Dan, a quick presentation picking up on some of the latest research, and then we've got a great panel here to discuss those topics. And if there's anything you would like to pick up on, please do ask, and we will find a way to make sure that we pick that up in the panel. I'm going to hand over now to Courtney Fingar, who is an FDI and cities expert, ex-FT, very knowledgeable about these areas, and has come despite breaking her arm this week. So that just proves the dedication of the Real Asset Media team to Expo Real and this session. So if you could welcome both Courtney and our speakers, that would be great. Welcome, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. I think there's a fine line between dedication and recklessness, so we'll see how I go. But I really did not want to miss this fair, especially at this particular moment in time when everything is in so much flux. There's so many movable themes and topics to explore. And this session in particular I've been looking forward to, not only because this is a leading fair for Europe, but Europe is where so much of the action is right now. Major geopolitical happenings are influencing on-the-ground developments in the real estate and real asset sector, but of course shifting foreign direct investment flows, which is my area of passion, and I'm really excited to hear from our experts. I mean, things are actually happening in real time, so probably crazy news events will drop while we're on this panel, but we will do our best to break it down and see what all of this activity means for Europe's cities, both in terms of their ability to attract investment, but also their attractiveness for real estate and real assets facilities and what it means. We see a lot of shifts, of course, in logistics activity due to all the ever-changing supply chains, and I hope we can talk a little bit about that. We will certainly spend some time talking about what all the developments in the world of defense is meaning for Europe and its cities and its investment dynamics. So, as Richard mentioned, before we get into a panel discussion that'll be a bit more fluid, and as Richard mentioned, please ask us some questions. You have a lot of expertise on the stage, so I hope you will take advantage of that. But before we get into that, Daniel Mahoney, who's the Europe Head of Research and Strategy for LaSalle Investment Management, is just going to set the scene a little bit for us, show us what some of the data and research that he oversees is telling us about Europe at the moment. So I'll hand over to you for the moment, Daniel.
To start us off, I want to share with you a new piece of research, our European Cities Growth Index, or ECGI. So this is an index that we've been doing for 25 editions now, which in the scheme of Europe's cities is no time at all. I just listening to a panel this morning, Amsterdam is celebrating its 750th anniversary. Can you hear me all right? All right, I'll hold it a bit closer. So Amsterdam is 750 years old this year. Our index is only 25 years old. So not too old in the scheme of cities, but actually a pretty long track record in the scheme of indices. Now, with any index, I think it's important to know what are we trying to measure? What are we trying to get at with this index? With this one, we're trying to measure what do we think is real estate demand growth. So if you think about a supply curve and a demand curve, we're thinking about that demand curve for real estate. So from occupiers, how much will that grow over the next 10 years? That's what we're getting at with this index. Now, quite a lot has happened over 25 years in real estate markets. We're into our fourth cycle. And a lot has changed over time that has required us to update and change this index. So some of those changes included in 2016, we added measures of human capital to the index. So things like spending on R&D as a share of GDP, venture capital volumes, as well as university concentration. In 2020, we added real estate transparency as a factor. In 2021, and in 2023, we added new measures of climate risk, looking at heat and fire weather days. And then this year, the big change is an addition of defense spending into the index as a new factor. Why? Why add defense rather than healthcare or finance or another sector? Well, the reason to add defense is European procurement spending on defense in Europe is expected to grow 4 times faster than the rate of GDP growth over the next 10 years. So defense is going to be growing a lot faster than the overall economy. And that's a reason we want to pick it up and include it in our index. Now, another reason to add defense is that its geographic dispersion in Europe is very uneven. There are real concentrations of defense production. And that's something we can capture with a geographic index like ECGI. Here we've mapped out sites of defense production, over 140 across Europe. We've weighted those sites based on what is being produced. So we've given a higher weight to things like drones, aerospace, munitions, a bit of a lower weight to some naval sites. And then we've looked at how concentrated is it as a share of the GDP of that region. And what we can see is some regions really do jump out as having this concentration of defense production. We can see in the UK, there are areas of concentration around Bristol, and also in the Northwest, around Liverpool and Manchester. In France, those concentrations are it's more central, in the Loire Valley, and towards Bordeaux in the southwest. In Germany, we are in an area of concentration of defense production. In Bavaria and Baden-Württemberg, another concentration. So defense is important, but in our index, defense is still a little less than a tenth of all the factors we're taking into account. So it's important, we wanted to add it, but many other factors also come into play in thinking about real estate demand. Another, of course, is climate risk. This is showing the expected change in the number of heat days. It's up everywhere. This is a burden that will be shouldered all across Europe, but some regions are more exposed. This is also factored in. We combine it with GDP growth, expected population growth, and human capital to derive this map of where we're expecting growth across Europe. And my big takeaway from this is how concentrated the growth we're going to have is likely to be. Europe is a really slow-growing region. When you look at population growth over the next 5 years, Europe's likely to be extremely close to zero. But we have these pockets of growth that we're seeking to identify with our index. Now, 30% of the expected growth over the next 10 years is expected to be occurring in just 3% of the city regions within Europe. Coming to my last page here, to drill in a little bit more on what are the top 10 and what's contributing to those top 10 rankings. This is a graph that shows a breakdown of some of the factors that go into ECGI and how they build up to the overall ranking. London and Paris are at the top of our ranking. They've actually been at the top for 16 of the last 25 years. On one hand, that's kind of boring that those markets are at the top. On the other hand, that really has been the right call when we've seen where has occupier demand really been the strongest. And a lot of that is driven by human capital. It's also driven by the scale of those two markets. They're bigger, so they're generating more absolute growth. Another highlight from the top 10 is Munich moving up in this update. And a good part of that is down to its strength in defense. The Randstad is also, for the first time, we're now grouping that polycentric metropole into one. and that has led to a significant increase in its rank. And then I'd also highlight here Warsaw in the top 10, a market that I think we'll talk about more. So really just a bit of a preview to get us started on this discussion of cities, and with that, actually, I think Courtney or Harris?
Yep,
Courtney,
thank you.
I'll hand it back to
Keep
you.
the mic and just come and join me here if you want. Thank you so much for that, Daniel. We will want to get into our panel discussion, but just as a very quick follow-up, you highlighted this over-concentration in just really a few European cities. Is this a problem, and do you see any better balance coming on the horizon?
Well, I wouldn't say it's a problem. It's the environment we are.
Just
we
what
think
it is?
we are in,
Yeah.
and so we think to be a smart investor, you should anticipate what you think that environment is likely to be, and it does. The concentration of growth, it does seem to be moving to a smaller number of markets within Europe, and some of that is a function of being a slow growth region.
Great, thank you. I'm gonna, I think in our discussion we'll pick up on some more themes that you highlighted here. And it's great that we will have some representation from key markets such as Holland and Warsaw, as we saw, which is broken there into the top 10, and where a lot of these trends that we've seen are manifesting very strongly. But first, let me get our panelists introduce themselves to you all, and I'll just give you, starting with Harris and moving down, just tell us very briefly who you are, who you represent, and what perspective you're bringing to this discussion.
Good afternoon, everyone. I represent Drees and Sommer. We are a planning, consultancy, and project management office with more than 60 offices now around Europe, around the world. I am the Director International of Integrated Urban Solutions as an architect and urbanist myself, and I'm glad to bring some zoom-ins from several cities where we work in.
Excellent. Annelou?
Yes, so my name is Annelou. I'm the country head of Cushman and Wakefield, the Netherlands. And today I want to bring into a combination of topics. That means that we advise cities, developers and investors. And the combination we always look at is on one hand growth, and the other hand it's people. So it's people and capital combined. And I see a lot of capital factors here, the quantitative things. And today I want to talk about also qualitative aspects of cities and why cities can grow or be ranked.
Great. Thank you, Maciej.
Hi everyone, Maciej Fijałkowski, City of Warsaw. I'm the secretary of the city. I'm a typical deep state guy. I've been working for almost 20 years for the city, so I am responsible for investment policy, economic development, metropolitan cooperation, all those topics, which are important in today's context. I think my point of view will be more bottom-up comparing to your top-down approach.
Great. Well, let's start from the bottom up and tackle these things. So, Maciej, I will start with you. First of all, you saw Warsaw being presented in Daniel's research as a top 10 city. What do you think is behind that, and how are some of these mega trends that are impacting Europe's economy and its real estate markets manifesting themselves in Warsaw in particular?
Okay, what I found really very good about this and what I like about this approach, it was this very strategic view. We need to look at this perspective. What is also important, and we emphasize it very much, that it usually this let's say trends or issues, they do not happen by themselves only. I mean, there are specific contexts of those places which are responsible for the final result, whether it be positive or negative. And of course, we as one of those cities which are on that list and which are the most important for Polish and Central Europe economy, and for European, I also hope it will be a bigger share of our input, is that we also bring our specifics to the situation, and because everyone would like to be at top 10, everyone would like to be competitive, innovative, you name it. If you look at the city of Warsaw, we have very specific context staying behind. First of all, there is no other city in Europe among the capital ones that was so destroyed and had to be rebuilt from the scratch. Warsaw, just for you who are not familiar, the number of inhabitants in Warsaw after the war decreased 99%. 99%. So there were only 1% of people, and almost all physical substance was destroyed. So what it means for us? In physical terms, first of all, city has at least 3 or 4 layers. The historical one, so destroy it. What is preserved, we take very much of it. The second one is modern, just after the war. So, the broad roads, modern buildings, mostly connected to communist ideology, sometimes very well designed, sometimes not, but of different quality. The third one is let's say, more contemporary. It's after the changes in 1989 Poland, when the new economy came, we just started to build a new city. If you look at a picture of Warsaw, you have Palace of Culture, which is an old building, and then you have around new ones, which the target was to cover it. In fact, to cover the city, the Palace of Culture. And the last one, I would say, is the combination of all those 3 elements. So the contemporary, really, from the last 5-10 years. This is the physical aspect. The, let's say, ideological aspect is that city, because of that, what I said, but also because of Polish history and some social patterns, city always was open. So everyone could came. I came from different town, far away from the capital city. Many of my colleagues also were not born in the city, so you could come and you could do what you wanted to do. The second one is that we always had a tradition of openness and active engagement of society. So it also produces a very specific, let's say, approach of citizen to the city. We, and just to point out this first question, we also focus very strongly on what probably a lot of cities do. So we want to provide high quality of services, but we also some specifics. We take care very much about good transportation, and we are a very green city. So we combine all this together into the specific projects and try to make it by our own way. Probably we'll have an opportunity to develop.
Thank you. We'll definitely pick up on some of these. And we should point out we do have a very good article about Warsaw and its urban regeneration in our latest copy of Real FDI magazine that you'll find on the stands. So please check that out. I want to check in with Annelou. Annelou, you mentioned that you had a kind of quantitative approach, rather, to looking at how European cities can thrive in this slightly volatile environment. Tell us, what do you think are these necessary ingredients?
So these ingredients are the following. So we think of cities as to be inclusive. So on top of your economic growth, you need to be an inclusive city. Mm-hmm. And what determines an inclusive city is 4 things. One is affordability, and we see that everywhere as a big issue, mainly towards housing. So that is what many European cities have in common, the affordable housing issue. But affordability is one. Secondly is about accessibility. It needs to be accessible. The other one is sustainability and diversity. Mm-hmm. So you had in your top 2 cities were London and Paris. We don't think that is the top 2 in our ranking. And the reason why we don't feel that's the top 2 in the ranking of inclusivity, and it's a combination of both, so let me be honest, is because of the following. Is it diverse? No, because in London and Paris you can only live if you earn a lot of money, and then still it's super expensive. So we see the diversity part of those 4 not being as well. So if you look at inclusive cities where they tick all the 4 boxes, Copenhagen and Amsterdam, not because I'm from the Netherlands, by the way, is a top city. And Copenhagen is a relatively small city. So what we see is, in order to be a top 3 city, or you don't need to be that very high that very big as a city. As long as you cover your accessibility right, your inclusivity, diversity, and sustainability. And then zooming in more on a real estate part, the sustainability piece we're going to talk about later, I think, as well, which is super important and which determines the polarization, not only between cities, but also between buildings.
Great. Thank you. I'll turn to you now, Harry. So we've talked about some of the success stories and what makes for success, but what are some of the major urban challenges that are being faced?
Thank you. I would just like to pick up on what you said. It's very important to think of cities as complex ecosystems where the social, the ecological, and economic have to play together. And what we observe, and there is an image maybe that we could show later, is that the security and safety and geopolitical situation in cities really play out on the smaller scale. It creates uncertainty, volatility, and this is why we saw high levels of critique towards concepts such as the smart city or the 15-minute city, concepts that we hope to open many doors for our profession. But in the end of the day, it did create, as you can see on the image, certain protests, even in Oxford, England, and realizing that despite all marketing efforts and despite all data and competences, projects fail usually because of the misalignment of stakeholders. You look at the largest Swiss urban transformation project, Aglolac, you look at the Google project in Toronto, waterfront, backed by Justin Trudeau, failed because of the lack of, I'd say, local support. And I don't want to romanticize and say the image of you see in the bottom right is the way to go, but these conversations with stakeholders, investors, and local population and activists and all the other players are not easy, but we need new instruments. And this is why, and you can see up there on the upper right, we were very glad that the European Commission tried to reinvent the new European Bauhaus to make Europe again inclusive and social and economically viable. And in the conversation that when we started to ask them critically, why does the European Union now on the highest level want to engage in small-scale neighborhood projects, we realized that they don't know yet how and where to go, and asked us, many partners that we included through our, please look it up, next ecosystem of Drees and Sommer, to really, and you see that the investors, activists, developers, and experts working together on inclusive and sustainable neighborhoods. And again, 100 years after the big crisis that we had in Europe, while the first Bauhaus was invented, we needed a second one to address the contemporary challenges.
Can we talk just a moment about migration, because that is such a powder keg issue in Europe, and to what degree does that maybe put pressure on some of these other challenges? Because it impacts clearly affordability and public services.
It does. We are now being asked, for example, when we work with some of the Berlin's housing authorities, many of them here today, we are being asked to upgrade the neighborhood but not gentrify. And we do work in places that are also socially challenging. If you look into the outskirts of European cities, in West and East, we have these monofunctional housing ensembles that need to be treated, they need to be transformed, they need to be upgraded. And in this sense, migration creates an indirect pressure through political volatility and direct pressure, which we can see also causing protests. But again, the only way to go is to engage different stakeholders and make them work together.
Yep, thanks. And Annelou, to what extent does this impact how you see the inclusivity piece?
So it positively impacts the inclusivity piece. As long as we do that well and we think around that smart, then it positively impacts, because homogenetic cities, when it comes to people, but also when it comes to buildings, so we need to be, and the cities that thrive are multi-use, multi-sectors, collaborative between public and private parties, but we will still see a huge polarization in cities, in real estate, due to the fact that we have super prime, super good properties, super good cities, and not so good cities, and we need to really rethink that by working together. And we did not do any research piece on the immigration. So
Yeah.
this is more my personal view on that. But if you look at the data that is in our inclusive cities, then we do benefit from more diverse population. But you need to have your infrastructure right, and that is probably missing. You need to have your housing right, which is also not the case. So there's huge opportunities, but also huge challenges coming with that.
Thank you very much. I want to return to Daniel in a moment and talk about the defense spending issue, but I think it'd be important to hear from Maciej here because Warsaw, of course, has seen a huge influx of migration from Ukraine. How does that impact the city? What pressures does it put? But also, what do you think that adds to the inclusivity and the talent pool of the city?
Yes, in fact, we in 2022 we received about 15% of our inhabitants, so 300,000 compared to 2 million of the city itself, within 4-6 weeks. So it was a shock for the local ecosystem. What always was our strength as Poland and Polish society that we are very adaptive. So we don't rely and don't wait for central, let's say, regulations, but try to manage the problems, and we did. In fact, very quickly, the majority of the people who came to Poland, they became active in the labor market. So within a year, about 70% of the people already worked. So, I mean, it's incredibly high. So the people. It was also quite easy to adapt both for Ukrainian refugees and Poles. We had almost 300 years of common history in one state. So we had a good examples how to talk to each other. And now it's the major minority, the biggest minority. In Warsaw, a lot of people who came at the beginning in 2014, now 2022. What is interesting about Warsaw is also that we are, as I said, very adaptive city and very flexible. We are at the same time the city that provides very high quality of public services, really, believe me, with attractive costs of living. They have increased in last years, but they're still attractive. Warsaw is a clean and a very safe city. This is important. It's a very safe city. I have two teenagers, girls there. I mean, they just come back in the evening if they want. It's not a problem. So it's a combination that helps us also to make our citizens satisfied with the quality of life. It helps.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Daniel, I want to, you showed us some interesting visualizations about the defense spending, and as this is such a pressing topic for the moment in Europe, is there anything, first of all, that you want to react on that you've heard from your colleagues here? But secondly, how do you see this defense spending perhaps fundamentally changing any city economies?
Well, I think if we're honest, we need to acknowledge the geography of these defense sites is they're typically nowhere near city centers.
Yep.
There are some exceptions to that. And they are sort of indirectly going to affect real estate markets. Mm-hmm. So they'll affect them by generating jobs, by creating some new demand for housing at the margin, some demand for industrial space at the margin. We're talking, though, 5 to 10% increase in a region on that. So it's at the margin, but it should help growth in these regions of concentration without actually investing in buildings where a defense manufacturer is a tenant.
Great, thank you. Annelou, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I really love this topic. We launched in April this year a defense team in the Netherlands, and a couple of things here. So first of all, focusing on Europe, it's not a wish. It's not a you can or cannot do it as a country. We need to spend 3.5% of our GDPs, every European country, into defense as of now. That means that there's a huge opportunity for us as markets parties to help our governments spend that money. They were not used, maybe in Eastern countries a bit more, but especially in Western Europe, they were not used spending that money. So they have a workforce not able or not the capacity to grow. They had to decline. There was not a focus on defense. So that's one. We as real estate professionals can help them. Also because of the lack of space and the lack of power. So in that difficult puzzle where you have to grow your defense industry, but you have a lack of space and a lack of power, there is where we can come in very, very well as a group. And I think that's a huge opportunity for us. Also a little bit of scary because it's the defense teams now need to start talking with us, and I see a bit of reluctance there. And I also see huge difference between Western and Eastern Europe, where we see in Western Europe, especially maybe in the Netherlands, where if you look at the expenditures in defense, they are more focused on the high-end parts. So what we see is we are very good in the Netherlands. We talk about cybersecurity, radar, the undersea boats. So high end of the defense expenditure, where more in the east of Europe, they're more of the mass production, which is great because also on top of that 3.5% of GDP which we have to spend, there's another constraint that is set by the EU, is that we need to spend it within European countries. So that's why I really like being, diversified throughout Europe, where I, as the Netherlands, can make more of the high-end things, and you are specialized maybe in other things, and then combined, we can really make sure that and the real estate industry will benefit from this as a huge niche segment. But I think double-digit or double growth each year on year.
And as mentioned, it could be leveling up of some of the economies in these regions where they maybe been underserved or overlooked.
Yeah. So, and it's not, I think what is interesting, we haven't looked that granular as you looked. So even sub-regions within countries. I do think whole countries can benefit from that, because on top of the 3.5%, you can also spend, and that's less of a hard figure, 1.5% of your GDP on defense-related investments. And if we think around that, I think we can all benefit, each and every city or region in Europe, from investments in infrastructure. So investing that 1.5% in infrastructure will then make our countries thrive even more and make them even better for people and therefore for capital coming into
it's a good point. It's quite a big ancillary effect. Harris, what would you like to add here?
I find this graphic, if I may just have the clicker for the moment, I find this graphic very interesting. So where will defense spending happen? But if you again zoom into the cities itself, many of the sites that were used for defense industry production or military use have been decommissioned and have been in use for example, if you right-hand side, this is Zurich. This is the Innovation Campus Dübendorf, where we worked a few years back. In the battle for talents, many cities, this is a military airfield, transformed this or started the transformation into a R&D innovation tech campus. And now with the shift of the security situation, the dialogue also shifted. So there is a political polarization in Switzerland to how to continue with the conversion of this space. Still keep some military use, a defense industry or not. On the left-hand side, this is the Microville in Reims in France, a former, again, military airfield and complex of military barracks that was supposed to be turned into a community-led co-working space and innovation hub. And again, this is also a place that is now being in discussion whether this transformation should happen. And I believe, and if you look, as fortunate as it is, conflict advanced technological development. And in this sense, the question is whether we can find the ways in synergy or symbiosis or cross-fertilization of innovation, technology, and R&D with this new wave of defense industry and production. And talking about Ukraine and real estate investments, and just the figures from the World Bank show that at the end of 2022, just after the first year of conflict, there was 900 billion of amount of damage to Ukrainian physical infrastructure. So just if you scale it up till now, you can imagine what type of amount of, I'd say, investment needs to happen. And what we realized is that this investment is happening quite in a discoordinated way. So there is the IFIs, international donors already engaging, but there is no comprehensive recovery methodology, how to recover the communities, the Ukrainian diaspora that might come back to here. We worked in the Bucha region and come back to Lviv from Rzeszów or Warsaw. And in this sense, creating this methodology of comprehensive recovery, how to attract investment, but also make sure that the social and ecological aspects in these recovered communities are back in place. And we did that with the National Union of Architects of Ukraine. So I think it's, as unfortunate a situation there is, we have to act now and support the colleagues there. And in this sense, I hope that we can continue also working through our Polish office on these projects.
Great, thank you. Annelou?
Yeah, so what you've shown here is that the defense industry and the defense expenditures were declining. So if you go one picture back, you see that we were transforming the defense properties into, let's say, more civil economy useful things. And we now need to turn that back around. And that is a puzzle, and that is complex. And that is what I said. We are working with the defense teams of the government who are used to decline, who used to have little budgets, who were maybe saving money all the time, that need to now spend money all the time. And then we need to help them spend that smart and fast. And is then the answer to this certain case, putting it, stop on make it civil and back to defense? Or should we use another plot? And what I strongly believe in, what is the highest opportunity for the defense to really grow and spend their money, is in the industrial. So what we see industrial, mainly in Western Europe, is becoming more and more difficult. Why? Because the salaries are incredibly high, power costs are incredibly high. So if you are having a factory making, let's say, tires in the Netherlands, you are becoming more in a squeeze, making margin, and then so these business models were declining. And those factories where there is power, where you have carbon rights, because the carbon rights are equally important, those are the sites where I think is the highest opportunity, and maybe not even these sites that used to be from defense. So for me, this is less relevant. For me, the most important thing is how can we spend that money quick and fast, and how can we find that collaboration with our governments or with our defense organs. And if I can then make a jump to what I see in APEC. So my company, Cushman and Wakefield, is also big in Asia Pacific, and there the collaboration between market parties and public and private parties is better. So Cushman and Wakefield is running for the government and for the defense industry multiple of their sites. So we are operating their prisons, for example. We are operating the border security as Cushman and Wakefield. This is something we cannot even imagine in Europe, that has been done by people previously called brokers or seen as brokers. So we are doing the facility management of defense properties, and there the collaboration is far more advanced, and also the conversations are then more easy. So we are hoping to bring that knowledge now into Europe.
Yeah, it is give a glimpse for perhaps where things are headed in Europe. I want to open the floor in just a minute or two for questions, but I want to talk about urban transformation before we wrap up. And Maciej, Warsaw has a really great example of this in the new center of Warsaw. First of all, feel free to react to any of the themes that we've been discussing here and how they're playing out in Warsaw. Maybe also give us a little bit of an introduction to the new center of Warsaw and how some of these themes and challenges are front of mind as you carry out this project.
Maybe just one remark on what you said, and then the question you answered. The war has started 3 years and 8 months ago, more or less. If we put it into the First World War timeline, we would be in the spring 1918, so almost at the end. And I have an impression that generally we still did not accept it or have not accepted that the war is going on. If you look at the materials used in the war, the number of maybe not the number of casualties, it's really a great war. And we all still wondering what kind of environmental procedures we need, how to combine industry with government and private. It happens every day. I mean, we are in the spring of 1918, so
Good point.
1980, yeah, 18. About urban transformation. What I mentioned about physical aspects of Warsaw and this, let's say, ideological or approach, our, let's say, main group of projects we do is the transformation of the city center. The city center, as I said, was totally demolished and rebuilt in very modern way, you know, with 70-meter high roads, good for defilates, war defilates like in Moscow. What we are doing now, we are trying to combine all those three layers, as I mentioned before, into new one. So, where we used to have old buildings, you can find some marks in those projects. When we have broad roads, we narrow them, put more greenery. Where you have modern car infrastructure, we do it more, much more friendly toward pedestrians and for pedestrians and bicycle riders. Honestly, I have been in many places in the world. I think that Warsaw bike infrastructure is really among the best in the world, really. And we did it in the city center specifically. So we have a group of projects. It's a transformation of the central square where the military parades used to be. We have transformation of the main road, some smaller spaces. We have a new bridge connecting to banks. We have a lot of greenery with high protection, environmental protection, so we had to do it wisely, something similar to that, but more irregular. We have UNESCO heritage protection. We combined it all together and just try to find the new functions. As I said, more friendly for people, which give this openness. You can walk there, you can sit there, you have trees there. Where you had a tunnel, you had a water basins. Where you have wide roads, you have a modern transportation, and it really is very well assessed by our inhabitants, by guests, who are usually surprised how good the reality of living in Warsaw is. So we highly encourage come and see.
I need to
Absolutely.
check my inclusive city barometer
It
where you
sounds
are
like-
in the ranking, because you tick a lot of boxes when it comes, for example, to parks, public parks. It's very important. Green, air quality, infrastructure. Yeah, good.
I did want to ask you where's Warsaw in your ranking, but definitely worth a look.
Yeah, I will.
Thank you. I would like to just check before we wrap up if anyone in the audience has any questions. I'm sorry, right there. Shout.
Thank you. It's about the rise of the bed sector, and the flip side of that's the decline of office and the decline of retail. How much is this reshaping the urban environment and reshaping cities? The bed sector.
Hotels.
Hotels, residential, student, later living, etc.
Oh, he needs it back, sorry. Or pass along. Annelou, do you mind sharing? Yeah. Go on then.
Just a specific question about, because you showed a protest in Oxford, I'm wondering what that was about and what it means for 15-minute city thinking. That was my question.
Okay. Go ahead, Maciej, first address that.
When we're talking about migration, I didn't mention one significant, because I forgot, one significant consequence we face. This number of people, even if not the all 300,000 left, because about half of Ukrainians left in Warsaw, of that number, has pushed really the residential market into, let's say, tremble state. We can see really a high increase of prices of apartments. 10 years ago, it was quite obvious that you could buy and own an apartment. Now it becomes really very difficult. So when you ask the question how the all, let's say, tourist business and linked is influencing, about half of new flats and apartments are put into the tourist and leisure sector. So it doesn't help, honestly. So one of the major problems we face, and unfortunately it's the same story as in majority of European capital city, is the increase of prices of flats and apartments and how we could deal with it. We of course build social housing, but it's not enough to make it affordable for mass scale.
Thanks.
And maybe just to
And
add to
we'll
that,
come to
so
you, Harris.
the Europe-wide market data is showing conversions of office to beds or living has increased, and it's running around 1.5% of office stock. And I think it's an area where Europe actually stands out relative to other regions of the world in having buildings that are suited to conversion if the regulation will allow for it.
Yeah, it's around permits for housing. That's critical. So we need to be less rigid on the permitting, and also it's transformation. I think the Netherlands is really heading that transformational thing. So we have never had vacancy rates of over 8%. That was really the peak of vacancy rate in offices, because we transformed many of our offices into beds, whatever beds they were. So transformation is key, but also permitting. I think we overdid it a bit in making that permitting complex, but also you gave a very critical factor to fasten the newly built beds, the apartments, is to collaborate with your environment, to speak to every stakeholder to get that fastened. But it's the permit, but also the developer who needs to speak with the surroundings. But how will it change the environment with the transformation, but also moving from single use to more mixed use? I think that is very critical, where it's like CBDs of only offices. We see now that rapidly changing to mixed use, where you have an office building next to an apartment building, or even shops, offices, hotel, and short stay. So this is really the key of a successful European city. Are they able to be flexible with their permits, and are they facilitating mixed use in smaller areas?
Thank you. We need to wrap up, but I want to give Harris you a chance to respond to that, but also address the question about Oxford.
Exactly. I will tell you how this conversation is probably connected to this phenomenon in Oxford. So we talked about Bauhaus 100 years ago, the new Bauhaus 100 years later. What we have now is still mostly the planning instruments from the 20th century, which means monofunctional planning, modernist, car-oriented planning. And the 15-minute city tried and implemented in Paris, developed at Sorbonne to, let's say, multifunctionalize the existing city, adding more work opportunities, living and recreation in a close perimeter, so we don't have to commute as we did in the 20th century in many of these places as we described. The 50-minute city concept was picked up by the UN, United Nations Habitat Program, was picked up by the World Economic Forum, because they have an urban transformation team, which during the COVID crisis was probably an alarm signal for many people who don't believe in many things. And then the combination of 50-minute city being picked up by the World Economic Forum, by the UN, and then with the whole measures of COVID, it created a movement to kill the smart city movement, and the 15-minute city movement being the symbols of observation, of privacy, intrusion, and of closing me in the 15-minute city. And this was, if you allow me this joke, we talk about Oxford, England, where you can fly to Tenerife for 30 pounds, or for Ibiza, and you claim that somebody's closing you or tries to trap you into a 15-minute city cage. So, but we have to take this critique seriously, because when we go out and talk about future cities, smart 15-minute city, we meet this response, and that's something we have to deal with very seriously.
Thank you very much. I wish we could delve into a lot more topics here, given the expertise that we have, but we covered as much ground as we could in our 50 minutes. So first of all, thank you so much to our fantastic panel. Please give a round of applause to our speakers. Thank you so much for joining us both here and those watching online.